Hi guys, welcome to this tutorial on paper 2 question 4, looking at the June 2018 paper, and following on from lots of requests, I wanted to show you a full mark, full response to this question. So the first thing to remember about this is that this is your writer's perspectives question, and as such you are going to have to really consider, really think about the points of view, the perspectives that you can see within both texts. This is at the heart of it. And I think what sometimes students end up doing is that they end up making this a kind of comparing language. So they just make it an extension of a language question. They know they need quotes, they know they need techniques, and therefore that's what they focus on. So remember to look for whether it's different or similar. Chances are it is going to be what the different perspectives are. And just to remember that perspectives just means kind of the point of view, the ideas, or the opinions, the thoughts of those writers. Now, on this, the perspective was about surfing. So I think make sure you think about what that focus of the question is. For me, surfing includes the surfers. In this case, it would include things to do with the water, the experience of surfing itself, so the actual sport. So some people, I think, felt a bit trapped and a bit hemmed in with this. I think, make sure that you're clear on what the focus is, but it does incorporate more than just the actual act of people surfing. So we know that we're looking at all of source A and source B. Now, it's a 16-mark question, but I think that you probably should be spending around 25 minutes on this because of the level of comparison that you need to do. Now, obviously, it does give you bullet points. Some people find them helpful, some don't. But what we need to remember is that we do need comparison in there, we do need methods, and we do need textual references. So methods are basically techniques. And the easiest way to think about that is obviously language and structure, but it could be other things around mood and tone. Compare, we need to make sure that we are looking, well, comparison obviously means similarities and differences, but in here we're saying how different they are. And references, it could mean quotes, or it could just be talking about things that you've seen in the text. Now, before I start writing, I would always be trying to do a plan. And I would just, find yourself a bit of blank paper, either in your answer booklet or on your candidate card. And what I tend to do when I'm thinking about approaching this question is that I simply track the perspectives as I go through the text. So this is why it's good to have some different coloured pens or different highlighters, because you're using your text for a number of jobs, for question 2, for question 3, for question 4. But I would be going through for this question and just looking, where can I see a point of view, where can I see an opinion or a perspective from the writer? And this does require inference skills. So, I took here, looked down at the bronze gods in good shape. Now, they don't need to say, they were bronze gods, which means I worshipped and admired them and thought they were almost supernatural beings. At the point they've put that, I know that writer's perspective is one of kind of worship and admiration. And then they sort of say things like, it was almost as if I was on the board myself. Well, clearly the perspective here is they feel part of it. They go on to say that they feel dazzled, which to me shows that they're awestruck, and they're plotting, that verb plotting. There's a real sense of intent and long-term planning about how they can get involved with surfing. Just hear some of the images about waiting around, scrambling and getting people's boards. There's a desperation to be involved, and asking if you can borrow boards, so a real perseverance. So just tracking through what different perspectives you can find. You may not talk about all of them, and I would do that on both texts. So in this one we can see that the writer felt impressed, but much more detached than the other one. The other one, he was really trying to get involved and trying to surf, whereas this one, it's more observational. They're a tourist, found it a bit scary, but actually enjoyed it because she was far more detached. And we get that sense of, people were on holiday, so it's a fantasy, an exciting, lovely lifestyle, but not one that she's actually part of. So I would have just put that into those that tracking into a brief plan, and I should then be able to see quite clearly where I've got some differences, and some of the major differences around in source A, he feels desperate to get involved, and source B, she really feels like a tourist. In source A, he's worshipful of those people and wants to be like them. She admires them perhaps in a different way, and that he finds it quite difficult himself. Whereas she sort of envies the surfers and thinks it all looks lovely. So I'm going to take you through my full mark response. I would always start off this response with, and it sounds kind of counterintuitive because we're looking at differences, but find something in common to then talk about what the difference is. So I've said both writers seem to admire and respect the surfing. Bird in source A appreciate and admires from a distance, whereas in source B, whereas Doyle in source A is dazzled and seems desperate to join in. So I've just made this initial comparison. I'm saying, yeah, okay, they do both admire them, but there's a subtle difference here. One is admiring from a distance, the other is desperate to join in. So I'm going to focus now on the writer's use of methods. So just like you would for language question, what is the writer using? Bird uses the repetition. So this is a method, it's a structural one, which is fine to use. And I've got my example, my textual reference, as we can see in that bullet point at the top. So blue, so soft, so sweet. This alliteration, so I've got another method in there, is slow and soothing, almost hypnotic. So I'm thinking here about those effects of the methods. The repetition of so suggests that the world of surfing is almost an endless paradise, a fantasy of sorts. So again, we've got this idea of some analysis coming in, a bit really in the same way that you would a language or structure question. Doyle is not a tourist, fantasizing. So this is what I've done here is it's almost an implied comparison. I haven't said in comparison, but I'm just implying a comparison there. So I've said, she thinks it's all a paradise. However, Doyle in the other source is not a tourist, fantasizing about the serene, beautiful scenes, in the same way that Bird was. He's at home and clearly worships the surfers. So I've got another perspective here, point of view. The metaphorical bronze gods, so an example and terminology and a method, shows that Doyle believes the surfers to be tanned, almost supernatural beings that he idolizes. Doyle's desperation to be part of the surfing community is clear. So again, I've kind of developed my perspective here by looking at this example and this method here. So Doyle's desperation to be part of the surfing community is clear. He uses verbs such as plotting and pestered, which demonstrate that it was a long-term passion and required perseverance. He needed to think through his plot and was determined enough to pester an adult surfer until he finally shrugged and allowed Doyle to use his board. So there's a really sort of strong and developed sense of the perspective here, and I've used words like, it was a passion and it had perseverance, he needed to think it through, he was determined. So what you'll see, or what examiners would expect at that slightly higher level, is you've got these embedded quotes. So I'm just using textual references to back up what I'm saying about the perspective. Doyle recognises that he was a nuisance. So that again is a perspective. He knows that he was annoying. He looked at me like a lost kid. But his earlier use of the verb, dazzled, methods and examples, shows us that Doyle felt so awestruck, another perspective, and overwhelmed by what he had seen that he was prepared to pursue his dream, whatever the cost. So we've got lots more in the way of the writer's perspectives, plus methods and references. Although Bird is very impressed, she seems to have a much more detached perspective. So a much more detached perspective. I've got in here, this is where we've got a clear comparison coming up. She describes surfing as the great art. Possibly, this suggests that she sees it as something beautiful, something to appreciate and admire. So we've got perspective. She states, I enjoyed the afternoon thoroughly, textual references. but the use of the noun methods, afternoon, shows that she viewed it as a temporary one-off experience. She viewed it as a temporary one-off experience. Okay, so another perspective. Unlike Doyle, Bird is not drawn to surfing as a desperate need. For Bird, surfing seems to be enjoyed as part of holiday making. She uses the verb envy to suggest that she is jealous of those who live there permanently. So you can see here that there's another comparison, and that we've used that from that sentence starter, unlike Doyle, and said, you know, here's the comparison. She's not drawn to surfing. It's not the same level of desperation. And again, some more of these embedded quotes and textual references. Okay. For Doyle, surfing is a way of life. And again, this is... in this sentence here, I don't need to constantly say in comparison. This really is an implied comparison, because my previous point talks about the fact that Bird is not drawn to surfing, but for Doyle here, it is. Something he immersed himself in from the age of 13. Clearly, from a young age, Doyle felt that surfing was a part of him, and from this impressionable age began an almost obsessive connection to the sea. So he felt that surfing was a part of him. So another perspective. So we've got methods in there, but sometimes a simple textual reference like that, you know, the fact that he was only 13 at that point, also helps to develop or explain what my understanding of a perspective is. So hopefully what you can see for that is that the key thing is being able to identify the perspectives. That is at the heart of this. What do they think? What do they feel? What are their attitudes? What are their beliefs? What is their point of view? How do they view the world? That's your starting point. Identify that. And then you're looking for examples and techniques that explain or clear up this. So if I've made a point about they feel this, they think this, I need to be able to support it with some evidence. And then obviously, because we've got both of them, I need some comparison. I need to be able to say how they are different. Okay, thanks so much for watching. So again, this would be a full response and would gain full marks at grade 9. Thanks for watching, bye.